What is method acting to you?
Method acting to me is a very clear, easy way to approach scripts, characters, texts in a way that is going to just give you really clear tools what to do, and that will give you a performance that's hopefully going to be authentic and engaging and truthful.
And out of all the approaches that an actor can use, what is it that you personally love most about using the method approach?
What I love about the method is that it's sort of laid out in a very accessible way. It enables you to be able to check in with yourself, that you've got all the things in place that you need to do your work properly. So to make sure firstly that you're relaxed, to learn where your particular area of tension might be. So in the class there are lots of relaxation exercises, not lots, but there's one at the beginning of every class that focuses everybody on their own individual sort of journey through noticing where they might hold on to tension individually. So my place, for example, is my forehead, where I think I've pretty much got a line now from frowning so much, and learning that it's your forehead or your shoulders or your knees or your fingers, and making sure that before you start your work, that particular bit is like, oh yeah, that was tense and now it isn't, is very useful. Similarly, learning how to break down a text, learning how to read between the lines of any text that you have, learning how to imaginatively connect with the characters that you play, but keeping it always rooted in what you find in the script, and also, you know, supported by your imagination and the things that you've experienced. The other thing I think is brilliant and useful is all the sense memory and emotional memory work that you do, that makes sure that everything that you do on screen or on stage is rooted in reality, something that you really have felt or experienced, or at very least imagined.
Mm-hmm. Can you give me some examples of when you've really focused this approach in your own career, so be that on stage or in a rehearsal process or when on set?
I always use method acting when I'm working, and a couple of examples of times when I've really felt it's saved the day. One is related to finding emotional truths that have eluded me when just picking up the script and reading or rehearsing. My second job was in a play that I will not name because the title is a bit rude, by Mark Ravenhill. And my character, Lulu, was very angry with her flatmates and boyfriend, and I was really, really struggling in rehearsals to have any sort of truth in this scene, and it was awful, and I was just awful for an entire afternoon. And one of the things that method acting enables you to do is to do a lot of digging in your own experience, in your own life, to find those little nuggets of, this time I was tremendously angry, let me find that and use that in this scene, or this time I was tremendously jealous or in love, or whatever it might be. And so I went home on the train feeling a bit sad, and spent the evening just really sort of chewing over times that I maybe had felt a similar way to this character. And eventually I hit on a time which was really hard for me, because I don't really lose my temper very much in real life. And eventually I thought of a time years ago where I'd had a massive old Barney with my dad, and I went in the next day, and that was what I used to enable me to find something useful in that scene that felt authentic and real. And I won't say it was brilliant, because I don't know that I ever really landed that role properly, but it was definitely loads better than it had been. And I'm very grateful that I thought to do that digging for myself, because I don't know what I'd have done otherwise. Another thing that I found very, very useful in my professional life has been when it comes to sense memory work, which is another really crucial part of method acting. And that's when we were filming Pride and had to reshoot some of the gay Pride scenes, which, as you know, takes place at the end of June, normally. And this was filmed at the beginning of November, very misty morning, freezing cold, and there we were in our double denim and 80s t-shirts, vest tops, and it was a real challenge to imagine our way into the summer. And again, I felt really, really grateful to have done detailed work in my training in method acting about how the body experiences heat. Where do you notice it? How do you feel? How do you behave when it's hot? And to mindfully stop myself from giving in to all the things you do when it's cold, like shiver and hold your body closer, but not to do sort of pretend it's hot acting, which we've all seen probably can be very bogus, but just to root it in truth and genuineness and how your body genuinely responds to heat. And I mean, this is a small part of the film, but watching the film, I don't think anybody would think, I suspect that was really November. And I think we all managed to make it look like June.
Can you talk to me about some of your experiences as a trainee student in method acting? Are there any incidences that you can recall when you were training that was a real positive or a negative experience through the method?
Oh, there's lots of experiences. The one that lands the most with me is a time when I was doing a scene from The Glass Menagerie with a friend of mine, and Reuven, marvellous man who taught us acting, who himself had been trained by Lee Strasberg, wouldn't let me start the scene. I barreled in to the studio with lots of energy, my fur coat and my weird hairdo that I'd hoped might make me look like someone from the 1940s. And he just wouldn't allow me to begin. He kept sending me out. No, start again. No. And so I kept having to leave and go out again. And it was very, very embarrassing because everybody in the canteen, which is where I made the entrance from, could see that I was failing at my entrance. And they'd sort of ask me to do it again. And it was just awful. And that school in particular at that time was a bit of a dangerous sort of environment because they used to kick out a third of the year at the end of the second year. And so if you were seen to be not doing very well, there was a sense of that the hyenas might start sort of prowling around, and maybe I was a goner. And so there was a real terrible lot of pressure surrounding this disastrous beginning to the scene, and I kept going in determined that this time it was going to be brilliant, and I'd go in with all this fear and anxiety and determination to confront my daughter about the fact that she'd stopped going to secretarial college, and Reuven just kept sending me out. And eventually I felt so defeated and full of doubt and shame and filled with a deep, deep wish just to understand the situation, that it took me the journey to the door, which had been taking me about 2.5 seconds, probably took me about 3 minutes, because I just couldn't bear really to get there and be sent back again. And that time Reuven allowed me to do the scene, and the scene was very different to the way that I'd rehearsed it with my friend, where I had really enjoyed sort of going for it and being a challenging mother in her 40s, which of course I knew nothing about at the time, being 19. But it was not that at all. Suddenly the scene was something very sad. We were both better than we had been, me and my friend, in all our rehearsals. But I didn't truly understand what that process was and why Reuven had sent me out so many times, until I was in a rehearsal room doing a completely different play several years later, about 7 or 8 years later probably, when I was doing a similar scene. It wasn't the same scene, and really the only things that made it similar were the circumstances. So my character having to confront someone else in the play about a lie. And suddenly I understood why Reuven had sent me out so many times and why everything about my approach initially was absolutely wrong. And what I love about that lesson is that it took me sort of 7 years to understand, but that it was such a powerful one, and that Reuven was such an amazing teacher that he really allowed me and us to learn by doing rather than by talking, because he didn't at any point say to me, hang on a minute, you're a 42-year-old woman whose daughter has lied to her, not a 19-year-old having a little row with her friend, which is definitely what the scene had been to begin with. He let me learn that on my own, really, through doing it a lot of times. And I think that's a really powerful lesson. And I hope very much that when I'm teaching, I give my students the opportunity to learn through doing and through watching each other, rather than through me doing a lot of talking, like I am now.
That's okay. I'm asking you now. That's fine.
True.
So what would you say are the key pillars to the method approach if students were learning in your lesson, for example?
Relaxation is one of the most important things. If you're not relaxed, you really can't do your best work. So that's a big important thing. Concentration, likewise, really, really important. To be able to put yourself truly in that situation, to be able to have a detailed understanding of who your character is, where you are, what your character wants, how they intend to achieve that, who your character is talking to, how they feel about that person, what's just happened, all of those things. Truly, if you are concentrating on those things and putting your effort into those things, then there's no room for being nervous, which I love. I mean, really, if you can concentrate, if you can learn to be disciplined about what your concentration is going on, then there's no room to worry about what your mum watching it thinks, or what your boyfriend thinks, or what your fellow students think. It's a wonderful thing because it ideally eliminates nerves and stage fright or screen fright, if that's a thing.
And what is it you love about teaching this approach to your students and the discoveries that they make about themselves or about a script or a character?
What I love about teaching method acting is not only that I hope that the students will have a good understanding of how to approach a script and investigate characters and things like that, but also that because there's so much emphasis on observation and on studying human behaviours, including our own behaviours, that I think that it must seep, and it does seep, into a better understanding of yourself operating in real life. So noticing, for example, what your objectives are a little bit more than you might normally do. And I've had students tell me that they've they maybe learned to be a bit more direct with their housemates or their partner, rather than sort of passively aggressively hope that their partner / housemate / brother might be a bit tidier around the house by just commenting in a very oblique way that perhaps they could all do some housework this weekend, just saying, goodness me, you never did washing up, please would you? Yeah. Noticing that that's what they want to achieve, and so learning to achieve it. Likewise, being in the moment a bit more, which I think is particularly useful now when we can so easily be taken out of the moment by technology, as well as just our own heads, which can drift onto any old thing at any old time. But learning to notice when concentration has strayed and being able to bring it back is, I think, a useful thing, not just for acting when it is absolutely mandatory, because you can see if somebody's not concentrating anymore, you can see if they're not in the moment. But also as human beings, we know if the person we're talking to is not in the moment. We know if they're sort of just mentally planning their shopping list or their next holiday or whatever it might be. And I hope that it will encourage anybody who does the course to just notice the truth of being themselves and present in every moment.
So someone with very little acting or no acting experience, are they able to do a method acting course in that way?
I think this course is great for people who haven't done any acting or don't know anything about the method, because in some ways it means that they've got no hang-ups about what acting is, or what particular approach they ought to be taking because they've done X, Y and Z thing, and so they may be sort of unduly preoccupied with vocal projection or making sure that they can be seen at all times. And in a way, with method acting, I like not to concentrate on those things and to just really, really hone in on encouraging students to bring work that is authentic and truthful. And frankly, if you haven't done it before, then you're more likely, or you're as likely, to be able to find that, because you haven't learned to pretend or to imitate, to sort of bring a cliched version of fear or anger or love or whatever it is you might be looking at in a scene, or even from a sensory perspective, cold or hot, or something delicious or something revolting. You're just, all you know is being a human, and that's all you need.
And then on the flip side of that, then, for someone who is experienced, either in their profession or they have a background in acting, is it something they can continue to study and discover through?
I think this approach is really useful for people who have lots of acting experience as well, as beginners, because it can be a really useful reminder of what to do and how to approach scripts and characters, and just moment by moment truth. I have lots of students who've taken a break from acting to raise a family or to do other work, and I think it can be very daunting if you've done a lot of acting and then left it for a bit and come back to it, because really, how do you make these words that are not your own seem truthful and said and experienced for the first time in that moment? How do you get underneath that thought process, which after all is not yours? And what's really useful about the method is that it gives you all those tools to break down a script, to understand what the characters are not saying, to delve into the given circumstances in such a detailed way that you can't get it wrong, really, as long as you really put yourself there. And I think that's reassuring, because it stops being just about learning the lines and doing good acting, which is ultimately what we all want to do, but it takes the pressure off, and it just gives you things to focus on that are not that, so that hopefully, if you are really able to concentrate on these steps to investigate a script and a character, then you're not worrying about the outcome. The outcome looks after itself.
Yeah. Would you recommend that people studying in this approach also take other courses, and does it complement other approaches or other areas of training within the area of performance?
Definitely. I think all approaches are good, and I think that different approaches are going to be different, successful rather, for different students. Mm-hmm. So there might be something amazing that really lands with a student from the world of method acting, say sense memory, or perhaps robustly going into given circumstances. But it may be that a lot of it they think, oh, actually that's not useful and I feel really self-conscious, or I'm too vulnerable at the moment to do that, and that they might find some incredible sense of playfulness and openness, which obviously the method supports and encourages as well, but they might find that more usefully doing improvisation. And they might discover that by doing a Meisner course that they become fantastically better at listening than they were before, and that absolutely supports all the work that we do at method acting. But I think that all of these courses basically have the same goal in mind, which is to encourage students to do the best acting that they can, and to also enjoy themselves and to feel connected and excited about the work that they do, and playful and imaginative. And of course, the more approaches you have in your toolkit, the more able you are to use what feels right for you at any given moment. So certainly I think, frankly, any course would be a useful one to do in addition.
And if you were going to sum it up in some way, what would you think the ultimate goal is with method acting?
I think the ultimate goal with method acting is to do acting that doesn't show. So acting that nobody can tell is acting, but that is somehow truthful and that will affect you when you watch it, to sort of have a sense of, oh, I know what that feels like, or oh, I really get that. I think that's what we all want to do, and that's what the students want to do. We always discuss what is method acting, what is good acting, which I think is a useful thing for students to think about. And that's always what it turns out people are aiming for, and what I'm aiming for too, as an actor and as a teacher, to enable people to do acting that doesn't show.
What are the most common misconceptions about the method, do you find?
Common misconceptions about the method are that that students will have to basically become the character, live in a tent, alienate their family, get a few piercings, get drunker than they normally would, start a fight, basically behave in a really different and weird way, probably in order to demonstrate to people that they're working really hard and doing something interesting and different that they wouldn't understand. And that's frankly, there are actors that really go a very, very long way into exploring character worlds, and they do that, but it's not appropriate to do that at this level, and it's not necessary, I don't think, to do that ever, although, like, frankly, the performances that these people who do that do are amazing, so clearly they are wonderful, wonderful actors, and it works for them. But it's not something that I encourage my students to do, and it's not necessary at this level.
What would you say to a student who was interested in taking the method, but a bit nervous about approaching the classes? What would you say to someone like that?
If someone was nervous about taking the class but interested anyway, I would hope that they would come along and give it a go, because I think they'd very quickly discover that it's a very warm and inclusive world. The courses, that the participants on the course end up really feeling like a little company by the end. Everybody is doing everything that we do, and so I think when you're in a group of people where everybody is doing whatever the exercises entail, then of course the vulnerability is considerably less, because you know that you're not being isolated and picked out to have to do something, and also nobody's having to do anything remotely compromising. It's all about just being a human and understanding what that is, and understanding how to how to bring your banal daily life into the class in order to make sure that the work is credible and authentic.
Thank you for taking the time to sort of speak about your experiences with the method, because I think a lot of people have an idea of what they think it is. So it's really nice to talk to someone about their feelings of what they think it is and how they use it in their daily life and in their profession. So
It's a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you.